You are the director of this
Yes,
performance. So as the director, first, how did you get involved with the Palmer?
Interesting story. So I have a pretty significant history in the area working for other theater groups. And when the Palmer finally got up and going, gosh, I'm going to say it was a good 7 or 8 years ago, Mike Doyle, one of the founders and the gentleman who's driven the renovations here, hit me up and said, would your community theater ever think about doing shows in our space?
Right.
So came, looked at the space, fell in love with it. Mostly it's not ideal as far as the actual stage proper, if you will. It's got a decent proscenium, but I love the intimacy, and I thought this is a great place to do straight theater. And so the first project we launched here was a show called Love, Loss, and What I Wore, a Nora Ephron piece.
Okay.
We did it in the Round.
Oh, you did?
Yep, beautiful piece of
So
theater.
did you guys have a stage for that,
We-
or did you just do it on the floor?
We just did it on the floor and kind of realigned seats and things like
That's
that.
cool.
But it was the intimacy of the space, and I have to admit, Mike and the Michelles of the world, they make it very welcoming and very accommodating. So it's kind of a comfortable, safe,
Right.
creative space to come to.
Sorry, hold on.
do something?
Nope, not at all. There's just a wire showing. Let's see if I can. Yeah. Let's see if I can get that out of the way.
Good.
Yeah, let me check. I think you were fine. I think that was okay. I just wanted to make sure, because nothing worse than getting home and you're like, okay, now I got to work around this.
But like I said, they not only was the intimacy of the space appealing, but the staff here, Michelle and Mike, they just made it a real welcoming, safe environment.
Yeah, they're
which is
great people, right? They're the best people, man.
Absolutely.
And when I met them, I was just like, they're my people. I mean, I grew up in a restaurant. They're warm, they're inviting, they're intelligent, they have great stories. They just couldn't be more engaging and more supportive and more in love with what they do here.
Exactly. So we launched with Love, Loss, and What I Wore, and then I did a series of other projects here, again, with other organizations, and this just being the host facility. And after a production of Forever Plaid, which actually was sponsored by the Opera House,
Okay.
Michelle approached and said, are you interested in being on the board of directors? And I've been on the board for the last 4 years. And we've done a show here, a show there kind of
Right.
thing. But this year we said, post-COVID, it's time to
Open it
launch our own season. So this is our inaugural season.
That's awesome. Well, and I think what she saw in you, I mean, it's obvious. I mean, you just are very passionate. You can just see that. And that passion probably right away sparked their interest and said, that's our guy, because they need something like this. They need something that's, I think, that continual process of having this and getting that ingrained in the public's mindset.
Exactly. And the Palmer's been known for all kinds of entertainment, but primarily music and concerts. And Michelle said, we need another part. We need a theater crowd. We need a theater program, if you will. So hopefully we're kind of adding to what we bring to the community already.
Yeah, and I think that it's vitally important. And I think the component that really interested me is how that so these opera houses were always fundamental to a town's daily life.
Absolutely.
And that's the beauty of not having a theater or an opera house that's just set with seats, because the floor becomes this almost it has its own life, right? It becomes its own thing, its own entity. Every town may have a different set of priorities, and they can utilize that if they have a space like this. But having play performances here really rounds it out in such a beautiful way.
It does, and not to mention what it brings economically to the area. Whether
Right.
you get a crowd, you get an audience coming in, and they're going to go to the restaurants. They're going to stop at some of the shops on top of supporting the Opera House with their patronage.
And so when you first were introduced to, now had you been here prior? I mean, you must have, right? Prior to your first performances here?
I had not.
Oh, you
no,
hadn't?
when he approached me about doing a show when I was with the other organization, the first time I walked through the door was to kind of take a look at the space.
Wow. Oh,
I've been here often since then.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So, and it's just got that feel to it, right? There's
does.
a warmth, and the fact that they put it back to the way it should have been. They didn't try to upgrade it. They just tried to do honor to the past here.
Exactly.
And they've completely did that here, right? I mean, it's just a beautiful testament to what this place was.
It absolutely.
And I've been in some towns where they've tried to renovate these and they've turned them into something else. And that's not anybody's call. I mean, there was reasons for it for sure, but people appreciate it when they come into a place with this type of history, and it gives you a sense of place.
And I like the history, because you're right. It feels like, you know where you are, but you're walking into another era, if you will.
Yeah, and I think, especially like if you lived here, it's a sense of pride. It's a source of pride for the town. And then if you come here, it just gives you more of a memory. It's not this cold, modern theater, and they're great, but there's a character to these.
Name the Xerox Theater or the KeyBank Theater, and not to diminish any of those sponsorships, but...
Yeah, but it's not the same.
No, it is not.
And this just gives you that charm that you don't get any other way. That's awesome, Paul. So now the performances that you guys are producing this year, you have how many coming up?
We have 3 plus a children's summer camp. So the last 5 years is our kickoff show. First weekend of June, I'll also be directing our second production, and that's God of Carnage. It's a black comedy, won the Tony Award in New York.
That's awesome. I love the name.
Oh, it's hysterical. Absolutely very funny. And then the very last show, Eric Van Druff, who is our conductor and music director for this piece, is taking the lead with Little Shop of Horrors. In between, this summer, we've got a summer camp for kids, which they've actually done, a theatrical summer camp. They've done the last couple years, and it's a huge success as far as the number of kids we bring in and what we're able to do with those young folks.
Tell me just a little bit about that.
So the theater camp, really, it lasts only a week, but it's an intensive week. And I'm going to guess at the number of kids, I think it ranges between 20 and 30. Mm-hmm. Most of those kids come and we find sponsors, so there's not a cost to the majority of the kids, and they get exposed to all the aspects of theater day in and day out. And then it culminates at the end of the week with a performance for the town, but mostly for their people, their families, and things like that.
So important.
It is
so important.
Interestingly, this year we took many of the kids from the summer theater camp, and we did a Christmas piece. And that I think may have been the piece that Michelle was talking about, where she had the solo work, if you will. But many of those kids we used in the Christmas piece, along with some adult performers, so they got a nice mix of the experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and not to sound like a Luddite, but I mean the fact that everybody's on their phones and on the tablet, theater, to me, anything that gets you more in touch with our humanity, right? And it couldn't be more vital, and especially to children's development.
Absolutely critical. I have a side gig. I work for the Theater Association in New York State, and what we do a variety of things, educational, workshop, festival, but one of our flagship programs is going across the state and adjudicating. And what we do is walk into someone's home theater, see their show, and give them feedback. But the reason I tell this story is during the COVID era of a couple of years, lots of folks went virtual and would do things online via Zoom, and we supported that. But to go back into the live theater after those couple years of Zoom performances, it just reinforced what live theater really is. To sit in this room and connect with what's happening on the stage, you don't get on the screen or TV. And again, not to diminish those mediums, but it's it's a critical experience, I think, for people.
The transcendent nature of a live performance, whether it's a music performance, a play performance, a one-man show, a comedy, a stand-up, it doesn't matter what it is, but the fact that power of that moment can never be replaced. I don't care how far in the future you go and how far back you go.
And it's not only the connection with the performers on stage, but it's that energy and connection with the greater audience around you. That's what makes the magic of theater.
I went to go see Garrison Keillor at this beautiful theater in Rochester, and he's so quirky and so eccentric, and he just would pop out in these traditional songs out of nowhere. He'd be telling a story, and then he'd just go tangential into like a song, and the whole audience would start singing along with them. And people were crying and getting goosebumps. And it's just one of those moments, because that's the power of that one man on that stage who just would sense, because he's just such a prime performer, and he just understands the room, and he would just sense something, and he would just go, and the whole crowd would follow him into this rabbit's warren, and we would just it was just glorious. It was just like everything that you'd ever want to see. I mean, I've seen a lot of performances like that, but I think he's just so masterful with that. But the fact, like you said, that connection of the whole room, it wasn't him. He was leading us to a degree, but it was the context of having all these people and this transcendent moment together.
And I always think a skilled performer not only leads us, but they take us to a point in a moment, whether it's in a highly emotional moment or a highly comedic moment, and a skilled performer knows where to take it and stop. So the audience then joins and has to do some of the work. Because anytime a performer does all the work for you, you can sit back and say, okay, thank you, as opposed to being pulled into the world and forced to engage and kind of experience that moment. And a gentleman like that, I'm sure, has all those skills.
Yeah, it's a perfect way to put it. That exactly just is the perfect way to place what I was just saying, because his ability to read that room and to know, and then you could just see how, because he would just drop his tone, drop his volume, and let the crowd take it. Because he knew. He just knew how to do that. And it wasn't about him, it was about us. And that's what the beauty of that was, you know, the reciprocal appreciation.
And that crowd walked away with a remembrance and a sense of what they experienced that they won't lose for a long time. It'll be with them. I don't want to be extreme and say life-altering, but sometimes you sit through some theatrical moments that really are life-altering.
I always say it can rearrange your DNA.
It can. I sat through a performance of Angels in America years ago in New York, and I will never forget that theater, that moment, that experience, and that emotion. And that's, my goodness, the better part of 20 years ago.
Yeah, I saw Laurie Anderson, you know, the performance who was married to performance artist who was married to Lou Reed, and she did this song about zeros and ones. It was binary. And then language is a virus. But seeing that live and what she was trying to communicate, and this is back in the 80s at the height of the forefront of the digital age, and to see how she was like kind of transmuting that into her own performance and communicating like what the future would hold. And she was dead on.
We're both dating ourselves talking about the 80s,
Totally
and we need to stop that.
But it's, you know,
so back in 2000.
Yeah, I know, like 30 years ago. But you're right, and I think that's what the Palmer can provide. A theater like this provides an intimacy and the structure that you don't get. And even sometimes in these grandiose, revived, restored theaters, they're beautiful, but they almost have a stoic coldness to them.
I was to say, absolutely a coldness.
Yeah. Yep, you got it. We're good? Yeah,
We're good.
That was awesome,
Thank you.
man.